So today is the second part of this series that we're calling Starting Over. And the subtitle for this whole thing is How to Ensure Next Time Won't Be Like Last Time. So if you need to be starting over, could be a career, could be a marriage, could be a business, could be a new romantic relationship. But for some reason, maybe you're starting over financially, whatever it is. In this series, we're talking about how to make sure the next time won't be like the last time. And this is an important discussion really because of what we said last week. We tend to learn from our mistakes in the arenas of life that matter least. Have you noticed that? Oh yeah, we learn stuff. Like you only had to send one really juicy text to the wrong person, right? And then you figure that out. You learn that pretty fast. Same is true with, you think about like hobbies or board games or sports that we're trying to pick up. We make mistakes in the early phases of them and then we learn from those. And yet, unfortunately, isn't it true that we tend to repeat our mistakes in the arenas that matter most? So we repeat our mistakes relationally. We repeat our mistakes professionally. We repeat our mistakes romantically. We repeat our mistakes financially. For some reason, when it comes to the stuff that really, really matters, we struggle to learn from the past. And we just tend to repeat our mistakes. And so last week, we looked at 3 different myths that I think we all, in our core, we know they're myths, but we kind of buy into them, and they feed into this. They contribute to this whole not learning from our past thing. And so I want to run through these real quick. I'm just going to highlight them super fast. First, we talked about the experience myth. The experience myth is that experience makes me wiser. But we saw last week, experience doesn't make me wiser, right? It makes me what? Older. It makes me older. Maybe it makes me lonelier. Maybe it makes me poorer, okay? Experience doesn't make me wiser. Evaluated experience makes me wiser. So today, we're going to begin the process of evaluating some experiences. And then a second myth we talked about last week was this. We'll call it the know better myth. Since I know better, I'll do better. Since I know better now, after having gone through that, I will do better next time. I think we've all had enough experience or watched the lives of other people that we know and care about to know we've seen this go on, and we know this is a myth. Because simply knowing better doesn't mean you have the discipline to do better. Simply knowing better doesn't mean you have the maturity to do better. Simply knowing better doesn't mean you have the self-control to do better. So I think we all know there's more to doing better than just knowing better. And then the third myth we talked about last week was the time myth. This feeling that we often get that time is against me. It's just like, you know what? I'm not getting any younger. So I better put myself out there. I better start another business. Better get this thing going. Or I better get into another relationship. I better start dating. I got to get, because time's a wasting. So I got to get back in the game, man. And there's this pressure to just sort of rush from the last thing right on into the next thing. But the truth is, if you're coming out of something really hard and you don't let your emotions come down a little bit, and if you don't deal with the baggage of whatever it was that just happened, and if you don't figure out what it was that went wrong, you are bound to just find yourself in a new disaster. And this is why when something goes really south and when there is a lot of hurt, or there's a lot of frustration, or there's a lot of disappointment, when you feel like the bottom has kind of fallen out of your world, you need to recognize in that season that time is your friend. And so these are some of the myths that contribute to us not learning from the past. And this is what leads to the next time looking a whole lot like last time. So here's what we're going to do for the next 3 weeks starting today. I want us to look at 3 practices that are crucial anytime you're starting over in a significant arena of life. And these are going to help you evaluate your past experience, because experience alone doesn't make you wiser. You have to evaluate it. And these are going to be things that help you not just know better, but actually help you do better. And these practices will help you leverage time. Because if you're going to come out of something really hard and you're going to hit the pause button and you're going to stop and think about it, you might as well make the most of that in-between time, right? So we're going to look at three things. And today what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of lay out all three. I'll give you a sneak peek into where we're going over the next few weeks. But the three go like this. Anytime you're starting over, you need to own it, rethink it, and release it. Anytime you're starting over, you need to own it, rethink it, and eventually, oh my gosh, you've got to release it. Let it go, right? So let's say those together, okay? Anytime you're starting over, you've got to rethink it and release it, okay? And that's a big deal because if you want next time to go better than last time, you have to do some things to prepare yourself for it. And so today we're going to start with the first one. We're going to talk about owning it. And here's what I mean by owning it. In order for you to ensure that your negative history doesn't repeat itself, you're going to have to own your role in your negative history. In order to make sure that your past doesn't start creeping into the future, you have to stop and you have to pause long enough, and we usually don't do this, but you have to pause long enough to actually figure out your part of the mess and then own it. Now, the reason we don't do this is because there's nothing to own, right? I mean, the mess, the breakdown, the breakup, the fiasco, it wasn't your fault, was it? Not at all. It's like we look at it, we go, well, I mean, like, she left. Okay, like, he started gambling. Like that boss hated everybody. Okay, or the economy crashed, and look, everybody lost their shirt. Okay, it's not your fault. He didn't tell you about his habit, right? See, so it's not your fault. And so the reason we don't own our part of our history is that there's something in you and there is something in me that says, you know what? There's a better story to tell. I don't want to tell a story about how I messed up. That's not cool. That's not fun. That's not exciting. That doesn't gather a team of people around me. I'd rather tell a story about how unfair they were, how this injustice was atrocious and it was committed against me due to no fault of my own, about how they wronged me, about how I am just the victim in this thing, because that's a juicy story. That's a fun story to tell. That involves community and draws people to me. But here's the problem with just turning your past into a story like that. It doesn't enable you to own anything. And it prevents you from learning. And it ultimately prevents you from growing. And so let me say it this way. Your best bet for a successful future is to own your share of the past. Okay? Your best bet for a successful future is to own your share of the past. And guys, this is so huge. If you don't want a repeat of your past, then your best bet is to own your part of it. And there's a reason why this is amazingly difficult for us. And it's because this is totally unnatural. It is foreign to us, right? It is like baseline human nature not to own our share of the problems. See, if you're part of the human race, it is in you to blame other people, to blame circumstances, to blame anything rather than owning your part. It's in all of us to get enamored and all enraptured with our pitiful story, our story that when we tell it, everyone just starts crying with us, and we're like, oh yeah, but they're crying. We're like, awesome. And then they get mad with us. They're like, oh, I just want to kill that guy. I just want to your boss, your ex, this is horrible. And they're just mad with us. It's so fun. And we get so enamored with our story that we don't stop long enough to ask the question, okay, yeah, but what was my part in the breakdown? And the reason this is so natural is because we are related to two biblical characters named Adam and Eve. Oh yeah, you knew where I was going with this. And so in a minute, I want us to look at their story. But before I do, I just want to say something about Adam and Eve. If you grew up in church, or if you've been in church a long time, or you've been a Christian, you've been at this thing for a long time, the whole Adam and Eve thing It's just like, sure, yeah, Adam and Eve. Like, I've got that. I'm with that. I don't really think about it that much in my daily life, but I'm with you. But like, if you didn't grow up in the church, can we be honest? Like, if you're new to Christianity, or church is just something like you're here today and you're just kind of checking it out, you might be sitting here going like, Adam and Eve? Like, really? We're talking about Adam and Eve? Like, thinking adults that like hold down jobs and stuff like that and stay out of like mental institutions, they take that story seriously? Right? Like, haven't we moved past that? Adam and Eve, really? And if that's you, or like even if that's kind of you, I just want you to know why Christians take Adam and Eve, the story of Adam and Eve, so seriously. And I want to say something that you might not have thought about. But the reason why Christians, including me, in fact, it's especially me, take it seriously isn't just that it's in the Bible. There's actually more to it than that. The reason that so many of us take the Adam and Eve story seriously is because Jesus took the Adam and Eve story seriously. And as Christians, like as followers of Jesus, I know this is crazy, but we take Jesus seriously. And the reason that we take Jesus seriously is because his place in like real history is thoroughly documented. Like he lived. Like there is no credible historian that would make the claim that he didn't live. And the historical evidence for his miracles and for his resurrection are very, very strong. So here's the way I look at it. If a guy can predict his own death and he can pull it off, I'm just going to go with whatever he believed. That's how I'm doing it. And for me, there's a second reason why I take the Adam and Eve story seriously. And it's because the story gives such rich insight into human nature. Like it makes so much sense of what I see in me and what I see in the world around me. Okay, so even if you're here and you're like skeptical about Adam and Eve, I want you to know, man, that's totally okay. And I am glad you're here. And so I just want to say, I invite you, sit back today, listen as we walk through the story, and see if you don't come across some valuable insights into human nature as we look at this. Okay, here we go. I want to give you some context. So I'm going to go quickly through the story, like just for some context, just to set up where we are, and then we'll camp in the part that's really relevant for today. But here we go. Genesis chapter 1. It says, "So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them." So we're told that God created human beings in his image. And oh my goodness, there's so much packed into that little statement. But we're not going to dive into that because that's not the point of today's message. And it says, God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number." And Adam said, "That's it? That's all you got? Like, how about some rules? Like, what about the 10 Commandments?" And God said, "You know what? That's actually not coming. That's not coming for a long, long time. And really, it's only going to come if things get all like messed up. So don't worry about that, Adam. Okay? In my garden, there's only one rule. Okay, only one. And here it is. Are you ready for it? Don't eat from that tree over there." Now, this is kind of stunning when you think about it. Because in the beginning, when everything was still as God wanted it to be in the garden, there was only one rule. Like human beings lived in harmony with God and nature and one another. And the nature of that experience was love and joy and freedom. There was no need for a bunch of rules. No 10 Commandments, no Old Testament law, just one rule. And it went like this: enjoy all of this and multiply. Make babies and populate my creation. And here's the only rule: don't eat from that one tree. And I'm not going to tell you why. I'm not going to lay it out for and explain it to you. Just trust me. Just trust me enough to obey me. See, in the beginning, there was no need. No need for a whole bunch of rules. People by nature just knew how to honor God, and they knew how to honor creation, and they knew how to honor one another. And the whole story of the Bible can kind of be summed up like this. God is trying to bring us back to that kind of existence. And we keep resisting. God keeps trying to lead us in that direction. We keep resisting. He tries to lead, we resist. And he just keeps reaching out and reaching out and reaching out and not giving up and not giving up. And now you might be sitting here and you go, I don't know that I believe that that's true. That's fine, but I'll tell you what, I do. And to me, this is incredibly beautiful. And we know how the story goes, right? Even with only one rule, Adam and Eve, they can't help themselves. They did what we all did when we were kids. They just gravitate toward the one thing that was off limits. And they broke the only rule, and everything got messed up. Like everything broke. Everything got broken. Creation, humanity, it all broke. And we call this moment in history the fall, okay, the fall of humanity. But in reality, it was the fall of everything, because everything broke. Everything got messed up. Now, if you're somebody who goes, I'm not so sure I buy into the whole Adam and Eve story, I bet you don't question this. The world we live in is broken, isn't it? It's broken. People are broken, and as much as we want to point fingers at all the broken people out there, the brokenness is in me, and the brokenness is in you. And you can think of it this way. We all have a sense of how things should be, and they're not. We all have a sense of how we should be, and we're not. We don't even live up to our own standards for ourselves. Like, there's something wrong with you, and here's how you know. You don't even keep your own rules. I don't care if you're a follower of Jesus or not. You don't keep your own rules. Forget about the 10 Commandments and sexual purity and all that stuff for right now. The truth is, whatever rules you think you ought to live by, you don't. Come on now. You don't even exercise 3 days a week. Okay? You eat stuff that you know is bad for you. You say unkind things to people, and then you feel bad about it, and then you do it again. You've got bad habits that you know are bad habits, and you say, I really need to stop doing this, and you can't stop. Okay? You're broken. I'm broken. All of us are broken. Now, the Bible has a word for that. It's called sin. Some of you go, who? I don't like that word. That's fine. You call it something else if you want. But according to Jewish and Christian belief, okay, this story, this is the origin of that brokenness. Now, here's what happens next. It says, then the man and his wife heard the sound of the Lord God as he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And they hid from the Lord God among the trees of the garden. So they're hiding from God in God's garden. This is not smart. But you know what? Like, when we screw up, we do a whole lot of not smart things. And here's what we do. This is what we all tend to do. When we mess up, we hide. We hide from the people around us, right? We hide from ourselves. We hide from God. We hide because of guilt and because of shame and inadequacy. We hide. And we hide sometimes in the most obvious places. And then when we get caught, somebody catches us and we say, I'm what? Sorry. Yes, not a trick question. I'm sorry. And no one believes us. They don't believe us. Isn't that unbelievable? They don't believe us. And you know what? They shouldn't. Because, you've been doing this thing for quite some time now, and the only reason you're sorry is because you got what? Caught. And before you get caught, what were you doing? You're hiding. And this is what we do when we mess up. We hide. And then here's what happened next. It says, but the Lord God called to the man, where are you? See, after they messed up, God, this is kind of cool. God went looking for them. And this is what he does. When we mess up, we hide. And when we hide, God goes looking for us. And I want to pause right here because I think if some of you, this is going to be the biggest takeaway of the whole morning. Something has gone down in your life, and you feel a ton of guilt and shame. And so you've been hiding. Some of you have been hiding for a long, long time. And what you need to hear this morning and what you need to know this morning is God is looking for you. And sometimes we like to say, and I just think this is kind of funny the way we phrase this. Sometimes we like to say that after a long, spiritual journey, somebody finds God, right? That's what we say. They find God. I guess my question is God the one that's hiding? I mean, wouldn't it be more accurate to say after that long spiritual journey and a whole lot of looking, God finally found her? God finally found him. I mean, it just seems more accurate to me because, okay, for those of you that have it, did you find God or did God find you? Okay, anyway, back to our story. This was no small sin. This was the worst sin ever. Taylor Swift should sing a song about this sin because it was the worst sin ever. Ever. And see, this is the sin that messed up everything. And yet, despite how bad it was, God goes on the search. He goes on the search. He goes looking. He goes looking so that he can restore them. And so if you're in a spot where you're hiding right now, again, God is looking for you. And he's not looking for you so that he can take you and bend you over his knee. He's looking for you to restore you and to heal you because he loves you. So the Lord God called to the man, "Where are you?" He answered, I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. And this is a way of saying, after I messed up, I felt exposed. I felt shame and regret and guilt. I felt this rash of stuff that I had never ever felt before. So I hid. And God said, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from?" And of course, God knows exactly what Adam had done, but he's given Adam the chance to own it, which Adam completely did, right? Adam said, "Yes, I did. And I take full responsibility for my actions." Right? "Do with me as you will, but leave Eve out of this. She's innocent." That's what he should have said. But this is so interesting. And before we dive into what he actually said, I just want to say, I think that there is so much insight into human nature in this tiny little story. They sinned and then they hid. And then the very first thing that the two people in the world did when they got caught was to blame somebody else. So God asked Adam, "Have you eaten from the tree?" And the man said, "The woman that you put here with me, she gave me some fruit from the tree and I ate it." In other words, okay, well, hang on here, God. This is your fault and this is her fault. So I just want to give you guys a chance. You guys get together and you work it out. And then you come and you apologize to me, and maybe if I've cooled off enough, I will find a way to forgive you. Because whatever it was that happened here, it was not my fault. Now here's the thing about Adam's statement. Everything he said here was true. It was true. It just wasn't the whole truth. And guys, this is what we do. In our past, when things fall apart, financially, relationally, romantically, academically, whatever it was, we all want to spin a story that is mostly true. But we neglect to tell the whole truth. And after you tell your story that's 90% true long enough, you actually start to believe that it's the whole story, and you hide. But if you don't own your part of your history, then you will lay the groundwork to undermine your own future. Then the Lord God said to the woman, "What is this you have done?" The woman said, "The serpent deceived me, and I ate." It was the serpent. This is true. It's just not the whole story. And so here's what I want you to hear me say, and this is so important. In fact, I can't even exaggerate how important this is. When something blows up in your world, if you don't pause, if you don't stop and take some time and take responsibility, like if you don't own your part of your story, then the part of your story that's causing you to start over, you'll just drag that with you right on into the next episode. And so here's the thing. We cannot blame our way into a better future. We can't. We can blame our way into the future, but you cannot blame your way into a better future. And here's why. Because blame enables us to smuggle our issues into the future. You guys know what I mean by smuggle? Right? I mean, think of getting the stuff across the border, man. That's like, hey, if nobody knows about it and I don't have to confess it and everybody feels sorry for me when I give them the mostly true version of the story, then I can just keep my part kind of tucked in my back pocket. And I don't have to face up to it, and I don't have to think about it, and I don't have to learn from it, and I can just ignore it and forget all about it. But see, if you do that, then you smuggle that part of it into the future. You smuggle your habit. You smuggle your poor relational skills. You smuggle your selfishness. You smuggle your unresolved issues from your childhood, whatever it is. Blame allows you to smuggle that stuff right on into your future. And that's what makes blame so deadly. And this is why we've got to pause. This is why before we enter into a next time, we have to ask some real hard questions about the last time. We have to look at the situation and the scene and really step back from it and say, what was my part? What was my part? What was my part? And then we've got to own it. Because if all you do is blame, it just sets you up for a repeat performance. And you guys have seen this. You've seen this in the lives of people you love. Something goes catastrophically wrong and they are a train wreck and they don't own their part of it. They don't see how they contributed to it. And they get into a situation the next month or the next year or the next few years and it goes just like the last one. And you're watching and you're going, oh my goodness, if you would just see what you're doing. But they don't. And so today what I want to do is help us by using a little bit of a visual. We're going to use a circle. And I want you to think about a situation for you that has gone totally south. And it could be the thing that you're kind of maybe even thinking about starting over these days. But I want you to think about in that situation and in that mess and in all of the pain and all of the horrendous stuff that went on there, I want you to think about who gets the blame. And so what I want to do is I want to let this circle represent the sphere of blame. Okay? This is like the circle of blame. In other words, when you think of whatever it was that went sideways, could be the last relationship, could be the marriage, could be the career, could be the investment, whatever it was, the circle is everything that contributed to the reality that you now have to start over. So for instance, maybe you would say, well, when it came to that mess, it was kind of a 50-50 deal, you know? And in that case, you're saying, well, it was like half her fault, you know, and then half my fault. Or you're saying it was kind of half my fault and then half the economic situation that was going on, the industry climate. But let's get real. Nobody does this. It is never, ever, ever half your fault. Because this isn't a good story. half of it was my fault. That's not a juicy story at all. So maybe if you think about what's making you start over, it's more like a 25-75 deal, right? Like you look at it and you go, okay, now she was an idiot, right? She was an idiot. But, I only had this little thing. Here's the deal, guys. Even this, nobody does that. Nobody owns 25% of it. That's just, and unless you're just an unbelievably mature person, we don't even do that. Here's more, this is more what it looks like. Here's how we break this down. Okay? Yeah. He was a big-time jerk, and maybe one time I did something, right? The whole industry fell apart, just fell apart. Well, I didn't actually apply myself. I showed up late a lot and all that. We look at it, we go, okay, mine's just a sliver. But guys, here's the deal, and this is really important. To make peace with your past, you have to own your piece of the past, whatever it was, however small you think it might have been, you've got to own it. If you don't, then you set yourself up for a repeat performance. So for the next few minutes, what I want to do is I want to talk to you about your little piece. Because here's what happens. The more painful the story, the less likely it is that you will ever acknowledge your part. The worse their behavior was, the more catastrophic this thing ended up being in your life, the less likely it is that you will ever own having contributed anything to it. And the bigger and the more emotional your story, the less likely it is that you're going to pause long enough to recognize that you actually played a role. But regardless of how small it was, if you don't deal with that and own it, if you just drag it around with you, it will begin eventually to undermine your future. So if you're going to start over, you've got to own it. And so let me give you some examples of the kind of stuff I'm talking about. Because these are subtle. These are difficult. These are emotional. And honestly, more than anything, these are embarrassing. Our part is embarrassing. And I think about the embarrassment factor. I think that's one of the main reasons that we are so hesitant to admit, you know what, I did have a part to play in how all of that ended up. So let me give you some examples of the kind of stuff it might be. I had a feeling something wasn't right, but I was afraid to dig around and discover the truth. Because I'd already made up my mind that that's what I wanted to do. There was something in the back of my mind, an unsettled feeling. I had a feeling that he wasn't, or I had a feeling that she wasn't. I had a feeling that the opportunity was too good to be true. I kind of knew, but I got so locked into the idea of it, so I just kind of went for it anyway. You got to own that. That was your part. And you think about it. Maybe your last debacle could have been completely avoided. Because even in the moment, you knew. Oh man, I should probably slow down and look into this some more. But I want this to work out so bad. I don't want anything to get in the way of this. Or how about this one? People I trusted warned me, but I wouldn't listen. I mean, maybe in thinking back, people were asking questions, right? Your friends were, you're like, why were they so shockingly slow to celebrate with me? And like everybody wanted to take me out for coffee. Like I can only drink so much coffee. And your parents tried to warn you and they tried to slow you down, and your sister kept saying over and over, like, are you sure this is a good idea? And when people brought up their concerns, you just kind of shut them down. You just explained it all away. You just ignored them. You just stopped hanging around them. You just shut them out. That was your part. You didn't listen. And guess what? It turned out that the people who loved you were right. but you didn't listen, and that was your part. Or how about this one? I stayed in that situation too long, and I enabled. Yeah, there were real issues. I mean, she was messed up. He was messed up. But I could have set some boundaries. I could have gotten out. I could have said no. I could have put an end to it, and I didn't. And you know what? I played a role. I'm a mess now because I stayed so long, way too long, and that's my fault. I chose not to get out of the situation. Or I was jealous. I saw my brother's career, you know. I saw his career, and I saw my sister just like taking off, and I was jealous. And so the reason I took all the debt was that I just had to like keep up. I mean, the reason I bought the house and I had the car and I took the extravagant vacations is because I was jealous. I felt like I needed to prove myself. I needed to keep up. Like, sure, my job fell through. Okay, and I lost some income, and the economy, it did take a turn. But the real reason I'm carrying all of this debt is as I looked around and it looked like everybody was getting ahead of me and I couldn't stand it and I was jealous, and I need to own that. Or I should have confronted her. I should have confronted him. But I was afraid. Like, yep, they were wrong, and they were into that stuff, and yeah, I had a feeling. And I knew I needed to confront the situation, but I was afraid. And I let my fear get in the way of common sense. So yeah, I played a role in this. Or it was just lust. It's embarrassing to admit, but it was. I tried to justify it at the time. I tried to explain it away as something else. I knew it was a toxic relationship. I knew he wouldn't share my values. I knew she wouldn't help me become a better person. But it was lust. And yeah, he had issues. And yeah, she had some serious stuff, and that's their part. But I should have never been in the relationship in the first place. I need to own that. I let lust rule me, and I should have exercised self-control, and I didn't, and I need to own that. Or, I didn't do my best. Yep, the teacher was super hard. Yep, my boss never really liked me. That's true. And that played a role. But what's also true is that I didn't do my best. I could have performed at a higher level, and I didn't. That was my role, and I need to own that. I didn't follow through. I was a little bit lazy sometimes, and that was my part, and I need to own that. I didn't study like I should have. When I started to fall behind and had trouble getting it, I didn't reach out for help. I could have. I should have. But I didn't. So yeah, it was a really hard class, but I didn't do everything I could. I need to own that. Or I should have left. When I saw what was going on, I should have grabbed my coat and left. I should have called for a taxi. I should have grabbed my purse and keys and just left, but I felt this pressure to stay. I knew it was just going to lead to trouble, and when I got to that scene and that situation, I should have left right away, but I stayed. And I got involved. Now, I can justify all the reasons why I stayed, but the truth is, I should have left. And that's my fault. That's my part. I could have gotten out of that situation, but I chose to stay, and I need to own that. Or I just kept telling myself, I can handle this. Like, I can handle this, but the truth is, it's handling me. It was handling me. I needed to get help. I knew I needed help, but I didn't reach out. I didn't do a single thing. I just kept trying to handle it myself. I lied to myself. I gave myself way too much credit. I deceived myself. And I need to own that. Guys, to make peace with your past, you need to own your piece of the past, whatever it is. See, if you don't see it and you're not aware of it and you don't acknowledge it and you don't own it, you're just going to take that thing right with you into the future. And if you don't figure out how you contributed to what went wrong, you're putting yourself in a position to do the same thing all over again. Now, we're reluctant to do that. We're reluctant to do that for many reasons, but one of them is because it takes the energy out of our story. It makes our story so much less interesting and cool and so much less dramatic. But if you want next time to go better than last time, you better own your part. And if you do, I'll tell you what will happen. It will turn down the emotional temperature on the whole thing. Instead of seeing the other person as a complete villain or the scene as something that was overwhelmingly unmanageable, you'll begin to gain some clarity. Clarity that you never had before. And that clarity will enable you to set yourself up for future success. And so I just want to close with this plea. Like, don't smuggle your past into your future. You got to own it. You've got to own it. Got to own it.